Naofumi Iwatani would find strength in what is known as a kaiju, would find strength in something that has been hunting him and his family for decades. At least that's what it feels like. But in this new world, he's going to have to channel the hatred, channel the power of these beasts that are hunting them for the greater good of a world that will seem to resent Naofumi itself. In a world that is apocalyptic, every turn you take, there's danger around the corner. Naofumi Iwatani has been running his entire life. From monsters, kaijus, from anything you can think of, that is the threat. Naofumi has been haunted by these monsters forever. His family, little brother, sister, anybody that was ever close to him are either stranded out in this apocalyptic world or dead 6 feet under. Naofumi Iwatani doesn't know what to do. All he knows is that he's on his last legs. The last legs that he knows he needs to survive. So he continues to run. Run for the sake of his family, run for the sake of the people that are relying on him for supply runs and for anything they need in this world. While Naofumi is running to the nearest market though, he looks up to see a giant monster. This monster is towering over buildings, and luckily he's not seen by this monster, but as he turns the corner, he can feel this monster's breath. It seems like the monster is slowly but surely turning toward Naofumi. Naofumi takes a sharp turn and hides in a building. He realizes that this building is actually a library. A building that he used to visit a lot when he was younger. Somewhere he would remember that he would have so much fun reading and writing books. He walked around, hopefully he can find anything left over, anything at all. He walks up to the front desk and picks up a book. He begins opening it, but everything is blank. He looks around the library and realizes that every single book is gone. And he begins to think to himself, why would every single book be gone? It's not like books are useful necessarily in the apocalypse, so why would all of them just disappear? And he was thinking maybe they're hunting books or something of that idea, but they're not. This is a normal library. Maybe 1% of all these books would be hunting, gathering, and stuff like that, but it's not. They're just all gone. He goes to put the book he has back on the shelf, but when he does, the book begins to replicate. All the books begin to fill every single shelf, but every single one of those books are the same. It all starts with the idea of the 4 legendary heroes. The heroes that would save a world. The spear, the sword, the bow, and there's nothing else there. It's blank. And it begins to explain that this hero is a corrupted one. This hero uses his powers that he's gotten from a world that seems to be non-existent. So similar to the one that this hero was sent to. But what is it exactly? Nobody truly knows of this hero's power. Naofumi continues to read on and is completely confused by this idea. What is this? He begins to tremble slightly and he looks up to see something. No, a monster, a kaiju, rip off the top of the building. And that kaiju is staring down, daggers into Naofumi. As he reads on in the book begins to glow. And the book immediately teleports Naofumi out of there. Naofumi is now in an unknown place to him. He's not exactly sure where he is, but he does know that there are 3 other people next to him. One with a sword, one with a spear, and one with a bow. He's not sure who they are or what they're doing there, but frankly he doesn't know what he's doing there either. He asks immediately what the people are doing and why do they have him and the other 3 people in some sort of cage. And these knights begin to explain to him that they were summoned. The 4 heroes were summoned, but they begin to look at Naofumi oddly. Where's his shield? Why doesn't he have a shield? They're extremely confused, and they don't bring this up to, Naofumi, because frankly it's not like he'll know the answer to this, but they do know that they need to talk to the king. So immediately they say that they need to go speak with the king, and that the king will give them more information. So the heroes that are there agree. They head off and begin to speak with the king. The other 3 heroes immediately demand compensation for being here in the first place, and that if they don't want an enemy, well, they better be given that compensation. The king responds to this and says as long as they do their job, they will be compensated handsomely, saying that this is what's going on in our world, in this world. There's waves. Mankind has been going through them for a good amount of time now. Demonic invasions that are destroying villages, countries, everything alike, and they need the 4 heroes to help, and that is why they were summoned. Naofumi kind of gets the gist of it, and it reminds him of home. That's maybe if there were 4 heroes over there, maybe if he can get strong here and then go back there, he can save everybody. Maybe he can save everybody that could or may get hurt. That's what he's thinking about. That is the first thing that is on his mind. But that's not the first thing that is on the other 3 heroes' mind. They want compensation now, and they want everything to fall in order, as if they were royalty themselves, and they make it very apparent. But Naofumi, even being the nicer one, is being treated like an outcast. Naofumi doesn't actually have a weapon, and they believe that it was a fluke. Maybe it was some reason why the shield hero wasn't summoned, and maybe that's for the best. Even the king nods to this remark. He begins to explain that the shield hero was practically useless, and frankly they didn't trust him in the first place, so it's good that it was a fluke. It was good that he didn't come. This then leads to the heroes leaving and going up to their hotel rooms. They begin to speak about this world, talk about what they believe it currently is, and they say that it's very similar to a video game. Ren, Itsuki, and Motoyasu even agree, but Naofumi on the other hand doesn't even really play video games, and frankly he explains that he hasn't been able to in a very long time. They ask why. Was he busy with school, or is he in a very labor-intensive job? And he says no, that in his world monsters roam, and they're called Kaijus. They're extremely strong, and frankly they're nothing to be messed with. His world is apocalyptic, very similar to what they say are the waves, but in his world it's constant mayhem. They're all shocked to hear this, and just shocked to hear that someone has actually experienced something very similar to these so-called waves. But this may be good for them. They can get all the information they can out of Naofumi in terms of what he's dealt with in terms of monsters, so that's exactly what they do. They trade information on video games, but also trade information that Naofumi knows on these kaiju-like monsters and what he had to deal with back in his home world. The night is then over. They sleep, wake up, and they arrive at the kingdom once again. They enter the castle, and the king begins to assign people, partners in fact, for all the parties. But the thing is, they have their own free choice to do just that. These people that are all lined up, the strongest quote-unquote people that are for their parties, don't go to Naofumi. They do not even take a wink at him. They decide that they want to go with every other hero but him, hearing through the grapevine that he actually has no experience in video games. Naofumi is shocked to see this, that he didn't do anything. He thinks that this is unfair and that he has other experiences as well. He has experiences with monsters that were very similar to the wave. But once he says this, a lot of them say that they believe he's lying, that the heroes that were summoned normally never have these experiences. They're very, you could say, gamer-like. They love playing games and they're just normal people. And it's hard to believe that Naofumi, especially the way he looks, is someone that would run away from monsters or even fight them in his home world. Naofumi's a little frustrated by this. Hearing someone question all the trials and tribulations he went through, especially in his home world, is horrible for someone to hear, but he doesn't pay any mind. He takes his money, which is a lot more than the other heroes, getting 1,500 silver, and he leaves off to immediately try and fight new monsters and level up as soon as possible. He does know a couple things. Luckily, Ren, Itsuki, and Motoyasu helped him as much as possible in terms of learning this world and what they know at least. But without a weapon, he believes that maybe he should immediately go to the weaponsmith. Maybe he can use something. But he meets Erhard and immediately finds out that he can't use a weapon. Erhard is even shocked to see this and checks out the gem that are on both either shoulder, and he analyzes it, saying that it might have some magical power that isn't letting him actually use a weapon on its own, and he doesn't necessarily even know what his power is. He's heard of the shield hero, but he doesn't have a shield, and he definitely doesn't have any other weapon, so what does his powers even do? Naofumi personally doesn't even know, and he sits there for about 30 minutes in the weaponsmith shop trying to figure it out. He can't find anything. He finds some descriptions, but nothing too heavy and nothing too amazing. He just thinks that maybe it was a fluke. Maybe he's only here based on a fluke. But even with that said, he is quote-unquote one of the 4 heroes, so he gets some armor from Erhard and he heads off. He heads off to fight these small little balloon-like animals, and he begins punching them over and over and over again. But the only thing is, he's not getting anywhere with it. He continues to fight more and more and more, and he seems to be gaining XP at a really slow rate. Luckily, it seems to be getting slightly easier, but frankly, it's still extremely difficult. Naofumi can feel that his power is on the verge of cracking. Maybe he can unlock something, a skill, anything, but for some reason, nothing is working. The skills that he's trying to unlock are not there, and frankly, he knows so little about his power that he doesn't know where to go. So during the night, he begins walking to his hotel room, and he's stopped by a bunch of thugs. These thugs threaten to take all his money, and Naofumi frankly can't do much about it, except for basically just scrap. So he begins fighting these thugs, and luckily with the boost of power he has, he's able to fend them off. They're kind of not trained and not strong by any means, but he does struggle a decent amount. But luckily, or unluckily, someone shows up, and he begins speaking to Naofumi, and it's the slave market owner, but Naofumi doesn't know that. He invites Naofumi in and says that he can help him. He knows he doesn't have a party member, not one at all, and that he can provide Naofumi with just that. Naofumi is interested and decides to walk into the place, and when he enters, he sees tons and tons of slaves. Slaves that are locked up, slaves that Naofumi makes him feel sick to his stomach. He looks around and he spots this little girl. He spots a girl with raccoon ears and a raccoon tail, and he imagines this image of his little sister and imagines her getting killed. He lost his family a long time ago, and he wonders how much her family misses her. He shakes his head and begins to forget about what he was thinking, and the slave market owner begins to show him something. This wolf-like monster that is level 75. Obviously, Naofumi cannot use this thing and doesn't have enough money to do so, and the slave market owner says he knows that's the case, but he goes around and says that he can have this or that, but Naofumi points to the little girl that's in this small cage, and he says that that girl is sick as a dog, that she's gonna die anytime soon, that there's no real reason to take her, and he says that that's who he wants and that's who he'll get. He gives the money to the slave market owner, and he gets the slave crest on Raphtalia and storms out. He learns of Raphtalia's name pretty quickly, and he apologizes for being so aggressive, and she's actually kind of confused by this. She's never had someone apologize to her, at least recently, and be so nice and genuine, and he explains the situation. He understands that she's afraid, understands that she doesn't know what's going on necessarily, but he is one of the heroes, at least he thinks so. But currently, he's kind of stuck in a spot. He can't train properly, he has no skills and abilities, he can't unlock anything. But once he does, he'll be able to save everybody, help as many people as possible, help her go back to her family. And Rautalia begins crying, and Naofumi says why, or asks why is she crying, and she says that there is no going back to her family, that her mother and father are dead. And Naofumi feels horrible, but pats her on the head and says that he's gone through the same thing. His entire family is either deserted or dead. His other world that he came from was hurt badly in a complete apocalyptic state. And now Naofumi begins to basically sympathize with the girl and immediately takes her to go get a sword and some armor. He knows that she is going to be the answer to his problems. He feels kind of bad about this, but he knows that he needs to get stronger and he needs to actually get beneficial XP from these monsters. But luckily, Rautalia will be able to help with that. But before any of that happens, he needs to get rid of her cold. So he goes, gets some mixtures, and is able to get rid of her cold relatively easily. Naofumi, actually being on the run all the time, knows some, you could say, hybrid medicines that he can make from a trash can, frankly. So he's able to get rid of Rautalia's flu pretty quickly. And that's when they finally are able to start leveling up. They begin their leveling up, but even Rautalia is hesitant about killing things. She gets over that fear to kill the balloons, and Naofumi finally starts gaining XP and gaining, hopefully, his first skill. After training on these small balloon-like monsters, he realized that they really need to amp up the pace, amp up the fight. So that's what exactly he does. He takes her deeper into the forest, and they find these killer bunny rabbits, but she is terrified to kill one. But luckily she's able to overcome that fear with some talking by Naofumi, and her fear of blood is more or less conquered. This will accelerate their training a lot. Immediately after killing this bunny rabbit, Naofumi finally gets his first skill, but these skills scale kinda oddly. It seems like his first skill is some claws. They seem like they're shadow claws, and these are his way of, well, hurting or killing things, but they're level 1. They have a scaling all the way up until level 20, and it seems like they develop throughout the entirety of gaining levels. So these level 1 claws act as one of his weapons, but they're still pretty weak. But now they can be even more efficient. Rautalia can kill things, Naofumi can kill things, they can kill things together and defeat as much as possible, and it's perfect. The leveling up process will be twice as quick. And Naofumi was right about this. They begin cutting down multiple monsters more and more and more, and their levels begin to skyrocket. Luckily, Naofumi is seeing great progress, and actually his shadow claws develop into, well, the next level, being level 2. They grow slightly longer, and it seems like as they level up, there's gonna be added effects on top of them. Even with all this leveling up and all this training, he did realize that they do need money. Frankly, his money is running out quick with the meals and the armor upgrades and all that and such. And especially after the recent upgrade he got Rautalia and the recent armor upgrade he got for himself, it seems like slowly but surely all that money is being depleted. So he wants to find a way to actually replenish that money source. So he goes to Erhard and he begins asking where they could go to get maybe a quick buck. And he explains that Loot Village is frankly the only place that they can go that is gonna be relatively quote-unquote safe. Frankly, they're not really ready for any other higher level village, so Loot Village is definitely the way. They head over to Loot Village and he begins speaking with the locals there, asking how much he can sell this for, that for, anything he's ever picked up throughout this journey so far. And he asks if there's any place he can go that would be really good for making money. And they explain that in the capital of the small town of Lutz, there is a mine and they can collect ore there. But there is very high level monsters in that cave. So be careful, especially because they've actually come from the wave. And Naofumi finds this to be good for 2 reasons. For one, he's gonna make a ton of money off of this ore. For 2, he can now train on higher level monsters. Yes, he's actually been kind of plateauing in terms of the monsters they've been killing, so maybe this will be a good step up. But even with that in mind, this is not what he was going to expect. When they arrive at the mine, they begin mining these ores, and they gain a good bit of ore, at least for money. But this quickly gets flipped on its head when a monster reveals itself to be a 2-headed dog. This giant 2-headed dog looks over at Naofumi and also Raphtalia, and Raphtalia begins to crumble at her feet. She falls to the ground and is terrified, and she begins crying, saying that that's so similar to what killed her parents, and that she is terrified and she can't move. Naofumi says that he needs her help, and that to beat that monster, it's gonna take more than just him. He pleads to Raphtalia and says that it's time to step up and time to prove that they've done amazing things, and that they have trained hard, not for no reason. So Raphtalia struggles to stand to her feet, and the monster comes charging at them. Naofumi immediately cuts on the leg of the monster, or cuts the leg of the monster, not clean off, but definitely wounds it pretty well. Raphtalia comes in and she stabs it right in the chest, but gets thrown at the wall. Naofumi quickly reacts to this, grabbing her and throwing her back toward her sword, obviously not super strong, but to the point where she can gather it and immediately attack again. She grabs her sword back, and Naofumi follows up with a punch to the back of the neck, and then Raphtalia stabs it in the neck as well. The dog is then slayed. This hound that's been haunting Raphtalia is now dead at Raphtalia's hands. This is now time, and the time, for Raphtalia to sincerely mourn and sincerely get over the PTSD that she's been through. Of course, this fear won't just go away, but it's a good starting point. And Naofumi now knows that they might just be able to get through this first wave without getting seriously hurt. After an entire month of leveling up and preparation for the next wave, Naofumi unlocks some extra skills, you could say, but mainly just levels up his claws. They're about a level of 4 now, and that might seem very low, but frankly, even their training isn't amazingly efficient. It's minorly efficient. So leveling up also does become a lot more steeper, and it's very exponential, so it makes it very, very difficult to gain levels on his claws. But they're still pretty useful. He's actually able to use them pretty well in battle, and he's had some good success. Raphtalia has also seen some exponential growth, and this actually proves to be true by her rapidly maturing into a young adult, which Naofumi is actually shocked to see. The fact that someone could just rapidly grow up is something very new to him. He doesn't even know how to feel about it. But with all that said, he heads in to actually check out how much time is remaining before the wave, entering the capital's cathedral and its dragon hourglass, which measures obviously the time between the waves. But the other heroes are currently there as well, and they seem to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder in terms of Naofumi, and they see the girl that is with him, and Motoyasu tries to make a move on her to get her to join his party, but Raphtalia obviously rejects this immediately, and after checking the hourglass, they leave. These other heroes, they seem so boastful, cocky, and let's hope that that doesn't turn around to bite them in the ass. But spoilers, it most likely will. With all that done though, they need to make all of the rest of their preparations for the wave, and once they're done doing just that, the wave is about to begin. The wave is upon them, and they immediately think about Loot Village. They head over to Loot Village to see it being ransacked by skeletons, zombie-like creatures, hornets, and various other monsters. So Raphtalia and Naofumi begin striking down all these monsters. And they realize that it's super quick. They're actually gaining a decent amount of XP from this, and they slay all the monsters in that village super fast. They're actually really confused, thinking that it would be a lot harder, and some of the monsters they leveled up on were frankly harder than those monsters. But they would eventually be kind of mad at themselves for questioning how strong this wave actually was when something becomes visible in Naofumi's view. It begins to say that an extra monster has arrived and that it's hunting the Kaiju hero. Naofumi is confused to see this and what it means. The Kaiju hero, it must be him. He must be the quote-unquote Kaiju hero, but a monster? Why would it be here? What kind of monster is even after them? He looks up to see a giant moth-like monster. It's Mothra, something that he's seen before, and something very similar to what he's seen in his own world is now after him in this world. Mothra spots Naofumi and makes a mad dash straight toward him. Using the supersonic flight that Mothra has, he's there in an instant. Mothra is right above Naofumi and begins to spray these antenna beams right at Naofumi. Naofumi immediately grabs Raphtalia and tries to run away, dodging as fast as possible. Raphtalia breaks free from Naofumi and charges at the Mothra, slicing at it, but does absolutely nothing. He tells Raphtalia that's not a monster they will need to take lightly, and Raphtalia says she knows that, but there is no way around it. They need to kill this thing, or it's gonna destroy the entirety of Loot Village. But Loot Village, all the people that are there, they look in confusion, as if they don't know what's happening. They can't see the Mothra. It seems like Naofumi and his party, aka only Raphtalia at this point, are the only ones that can see the Mothra. And he actually is happy to see this. Maybe that means the damage isn't permanent. Maybe the damage will recoup itself. Maybe the damage isn't even happening and it's just in their brain, or maybe it's part of some simulation, a game. So he immediately jumps to that conclusion and starts fighting it. He does realize though that this is a threat. If he dies here, he will die for real, but at least it does relieve some concern that, well, the people of the village aren't going to get hurt. Naofumi charges at Mothra, jumping up and boosting off of the hands of Raphtalia, landing on the back. Mothra tries to fly around and get him off, but he digs his claws within Mothra, and the more Mothra moves, the more he begins to claw down on him. He begins to scale Mothra, more or less slice into him every time he moves, and it begins to cut Mothra apart, and it begins to bleed Mothra. But this isn't going to kill it. Mothra is still alive and begins to slowly but surely regenerate. He realizes that there is no necessarily beating this thing. He jumps off of the giant monster, but the giant monster is not fighting him anymore. The giant monster lands in front of Naofumi and Raphtalia and doesn't do anything. The monster then just erupts into a ton of moths and butterflies and disappears. Naofumi doesn't even know what just happened. He's not sure. But Raphtalia wants to shine some light on this situation. Mothra, like the one she's read in books. Mothra supposedly was never a bad monster per se. Maybe it was a blessing that Mothra showed up? The rest of Loot Village runs over as the skies clear up, and they thank Naofumi for protecting them. But what was he fighting like just 2 seconds ago? He says to not worry about it, that luckily it was just something the hero had to deal with, and they didn't have to deal with it. Naofumi immediately walks over to all the butterflies and moths, and something appears in his skill set. Skill unlocked, transformation. The transformation skill set seems to have unlocked various other skills as well, but all at a low level. And some of them aren't even unlocked, but the main one that is unlocked is by the name of regeneration. It seems like Naofumi has been given a skill that will allow him to slowly but surely regenerate depending on the level. And he would assume that the more damage he takes, the more levels that skill will eventually gain. he begins to think that maybe Mothra, all of the abilities Mothra has, well, blessed him. Maybe it was he got blessed by Mothra's skills and Mothra itself, and now he's going to have very similar skills to the monster they were just facing down. And he is optimistic, but he's not 100% sure if that's the case. But with all that said, the first wave of catastrophe is now over. With that all done and wrapped up, with the first wave, the heroes are actually treated to a state dinner, which Naofumi reluctantly attends, in which he really doesn't want to deal with these other heroes. He doesn't have necessarily any bad blood toward them by any means, but he also doesn't have any good feelings toward them. He realizes how secluded he felt and how bad it felt when they were treating him like less than a hero and made him deal with everything on his own. So now he just feels like he should be on his own no matter what. But Naofumi stays and hopes that Raphtalia can have some fun and at least eat some good food while they're there. She offers him some food, but even Naofumi continues to tell her that it's fine and that he doesn't need anything. He promises that he doesn't, and, well, this good night would go really, really bad really fast. Mine, one of the king's daughters, begins to say something to Motoyasu, telling him that Raphtalia is a slave, that she is forced to the whim of Naofumi, and that won't he be a good hero and save her? Motoyasu immediately walks over to Naofumi and throws his glove at the ground right in front of Raphtalia, and Naofumi is confused at this. What does he even want? Motoyasu begins to speak, explaining that he knows that Raphtalia is a slave, and fact that the heroes should never have them. And the fact that Naofumi, the one that went through so much pain and suffering in his own world, would have a slave is despicable to Motoyasu. But all these words, everything he's saying just doesn't sound like Motoyasu. Of course, Naofumi doesn't know him perfectly well. He's not best friends with the guy, but he knows who he is to a certain extent. He knows that these aren't the words of him, at least not fully. They're definitely manipulated to a certain extent. He looks at mine but doesn't say a word and says that he doesn't accept his duel, that there's no reason to duel, and that Raphtalia is with him by pure choice. Yes, she has a slavery or a slave crest on her, but that doesn't even matter. Raphtalia has said herself that she doesn't want to take it off. Naofumi even said that he offered multiple times, but still she sees it as an act of loyalty. And on top of that, slavery is legal, so why does it matter? Naofumi and Raphtalia are about to leave, but they grab Raphtalia and drag her away and practically muzzle her like an animal, and this pisses Naofumi off, telling them to let her go right now or else. They begin to mock Naofumi, saying that, oh, like he's not going to do anything, he doesn't even have a weapon. He has to win his duel or he won't get Raphtalia back. Naofumi is pissed at this point, boiling, seething, and he says that he'll fight right now. And so that duel then begins. They go out to the arena, and when they start fighting, it's pretty obvious who has the upper hand. Naofumi has a way larger skill set, at least in terms of fighting and surviving. Motoyasu, on the other hand, is so basic in his movement, lumbered, and it seems like he can't even move properly. To Naofumi, he's been surviving all his life. He's been fighting monsters all his life. He's been doing anything he can to survive. And well, he will continue to do that even if this isn't his home world. He grips around Motoyasu's neck and his claws begin to be revealed, bigger and bigger, and they light a blaze of fire. Naofumi lifts him up and tells him to forfeit now or else he'll make sure that he suffers. He won't kill him, but he damn well makes sure that he remembers the day he tried to fight Naofumi. As Naofumi is telling him this, a blast of magic hits him in the back and sends him flying. He's able to regather himself, digging his claws into the ground, catching himself. And, well, Motoyasu takes this chance to use his most powerful attack, anything he possibly can, to get an advantage on Naofumi, charging it up and blasting it at Naofumi. It looks like Naofumi is consumed, completely consumed, but that's just not the case. He's actually behind Motoyasu. Whatever he just did, he's not so sure, but it's as if he's somehow walked out of the beam. Half of his body is scorched, but slowly but surely Naofumi's body begins to regenerate, and Naofumi smirks. That's not that strong. That's not that strong. Wow. For being so high and mighty? Why do you seem so weak, Motoyasu? Naofumi immediately slams Motoyasu into the ground and pins one of his legs. You know, it's really unfortunate for you, Mr. Motoyasu, spear hero or whatever. I have so many abilities that I can unlock. So many. But out of all of them, this one is perfect just for you. Naofumi begins to have scales on his body, but these scales immediately begin to fall off. They begin to land on Motoyasu and begin to stick like glue. Every part of his body begins to get covered by these scales. His legs, arms, torso, completely covered in these scales. He gets up off of Motoyasu and begins to walk away, saying that the fight is over. He'll be taking Raphtalia and they'll be leaving now. But Mine says that the fight isn't over. What did he do? Just put some scales on him? Mine, you gotta realize very quickly, that over there, what is on his body, is slowly killing him. It's a nice poisonous effect, but it's weak enough that if you act quickly, you could save him in the next 15 minutes or so. Your choice though. You can either say that I won the fight, or watch him suffer for the next 15 minutes and die on your hands. Mine and the king immediately call off the duel and say Naofumi has won, and Naofumi grabs Raphtalia's hand and begins to leave. Raphtalia takes off the muzzle and even kicks one of the guards and says that she would have never have left in the first place, and he smiles, saying that he knows. But this has just enraged him even more. These people, they're playing games. Even royalty is doing this. The royalty that is supposedly supposed to be on his side, the royalty that is supposedly the ones that summoned the heroes for their help. It doesn't feel like that right now. It feels like royalty and everybody else is against Naofumi. And he begins to realize something. If they see me as a monster, then let's make sure they know that I'm a monster.
As Naofumi leaves the gladiatorial arena, feeling quite good about himself that he just defeated Motoyasu, he decides that he probably needs another party member, since he and Raphtalia can't really do everything on their own, and they will probably need another member. So, seeing that Raphtalia is done so well for him at the moment, he thought that he should go and get another slave maybe. So he goes and sees the slave merchant, where instead of selling a slave to Naofumi, the merchant suggests that he buys a gacha monster egg. Him explaining that it is just a monster egg, pretty much a randomized monster egg, that it is a luck of the draw. He could get a filolial, a dragon, or just something else entirely. But it's just a random luck of the draw. It doesn't really matter what he gets. So Naofumi thinks, having a monster on his team and in his party would actually be quite beneficial. So he decides to go with it. So he buys the gacha egg and leaves the building. As he leaves, he and Philo then head for Loot Village, as a couple of days later they arrive. Then Naofumi wakes up like the night or the morning after, as he hears a cracking sound. Him looking up to see that the egg is cracking, he immediately goes down and looks at it. Him seeing the egg bust open, revealing a filolial. However, it's not a normal filolial, it's weird. It's, instead of feathers, it's got some weird quills like a hedgehog or a porcupine would in his old world. And he's still got feathers, but they're just more replaced by these quills. It's weird, and its skin is weird as well. It's a weird dark grey colour with these strange kind of cyan, almost veins protruding and bulging over its skin and showing themselves, with its head and body just being a lot more monstrous and more threatening than a normal filolial's would. As he sees this, he's a bit unsure of what it is, but the filolial immediately imprints on Naofumi, jumping up and being very attached to him. A few days later, the filolial is nearly fully sized, him naming it Philo, and it is a gigantic behemoth, being a lot more threatening and scary than a normal filolial would, being almost a mix of a dragon and a filolial with some other strange, kind of creepy and monstrous kind of features to him. As they're kind of looking around Philo, looking at how big she's gotten, they hear a strange ruckus around in the village centre. As they go down, Naofumi goes down to the village centre to see what's going on. He sees that there is some soldiers there, which kind of confuses him as he goes in to ask what's going on, when he sees Mine up on the kind of pedestal, yelling and demanding stuff and exclaiming to the villagers that their new lord is Modiasu, the spear hero, and they shall now be doing heavy taxes, with the taxes being a toll of 50 coins every time they enter and leave the village, which everyone believes is far too much. Naofumi especially, as he brings this up to Mine, explaining that it is far too much, and what does he expect these people to be, some sort of rich, wealthy merchants or something. As Mine immediately tells him to be quiet or he will be removed, he doesn't do that. He starts walking towards Mine, kind of arguing his case further, when two soldiers step in front of him, with Mine telling them to make him leave and take 50 coins away from him for the toll that he has to pay for leaving. Naofumi isn't having it, as he charges towards Mine, slicing down and cutting down any soldier that gets in his path, taking them down, and in a few seconds, Raftalia and Philo have nearly killed all of the soldiers, pretty much, with only leaving a few of them alive. Naofumi having his shadow claw right up against Mine's throat, threatening to kill her, preparing to kill her. And that is until Raftalia explains something and kind of brings something up to him, that if he does kill her, that'll be a lot more trouble for them. As if he does do that, they'll make enemies of both the kingdom and the king and the other heroes, which wouldn't be good. So Naofumi, hearing these kind of this explanation, decides to let Mine go, kicking her out of this village. After this is all sorted out, Naofumi and his party then leaving the village and going back to the royal capital. As while they're on the road, Naofumi wakes up to see that Philo is gone, and a little girl is next to him, naked. But she's not a normal girl, she's weird. She's got grey skin with the same kind of turquoise cyan veins that were all around him, and cyan markings all across her body, with her having some pure snow white hair and some strange grey wings that have got some quills on them. which confused Naofumi, but then it kind of clicks as she explains that she is Philo, which he thinks, and Raftalia thinks, is pretty cool, since their filolial can turn into a human on command, so that will be a lot easier to get into different places. Once they arrive to the royal capital, Naofumi brings Philo to Erhard to see if he can sort out some clothing that won't tear every time Raftalia transforms. No, not Raftalia, Philo transforms, sorry. After this, he explains that he can't do it, but maybe the dressmaker can, so they go to the dressmaker, who explains that they need magic thread, which only the magic shop owner has. So they then go to the magic shop owner to make some magic clothes for Philo. However, the magic shop owner needs a new magic gemstone for her loom, since she can't make her magic, make the magic thread or the magic clothes for Philo if she doesn't have the magic gemstone. So they immediately decide to head off and find said magic gemstone. They go off, Naofumi, his party, and the magic shop owner head off, arriving at an abandoned alchemist tomb, with them seeing that it has a cursed seed. As they think it's pretty weird, Naofumi goes up to see it. He goes to open up the box to see that it isn't there. The cursed seed's missing, and he turns asking the magic owner, or the magic shop owner, why it's missing, and she starts fretting, saying that this could be bad. Like, this could be really, really bad. But they have no time to think about this, they have to keep going. As after they kind of explain and get through a few more tunnels, they are then attacked by multiple creatures, which aren't a lot of problem for Naofumi and his party, since they are very strong. Philo having the ability to shoot her quills like projectiles, stabbing into the creatures, killing them immediately. And Naofumi is able to use his different claws and different attacks, using his kind of antennae beams that he shoots from his eyes to cut down multiple beings, and using some other shielding abilities that he got from the giant kaiju that he defeated earlier. After they cut through and get through a bunch of these monsters, getting through the tunnels, they finally locate a very bright kind of cavern room, with them seeing that there is a giant vein of this gem, where they think it's pretty cool until they see a Nue, which has made its nest in this tomb. It immediately getting startled and starts attacking Naofumi's party, thinking that they are a threat. Naofumi immediately charges towards it, using his claws to slice at it before using his antennae beams to shoot his laser kind of beams or rays at it, slightly damaging it, and using his other toxins to try and poison it, but seeing it doesn't work. After this, Philo uses her different kicks and quill attacks, putting massive damage on it, and Raftalia uses her swords and other magical abilities to take the beast down, and after a quick fight, the beast is defeated. Once the Nue is defeated, now the magic store owner or magic shop owner decides to mine some of the magic gemstone, with Naofumi wanting to try something out, as he lets off a few of his different moths and butterflies out of his hand, them kind of just appearing and flying away. They start to cover the Nue before it slowly glowing. It glowing this strange colour, slowly going whiter and whiter until it just poofs, turning into some glowing dust and disappearing. As Naofumi gets a message on his kind of HUD and kind of heads up display explaining that his poison has gone from level 1 to level 4. His pretty much making it so his poison is a lot stronger. His speed and strength have leveled up considerably, as well as his durability, and his shadow claws have gone from level 7 to level 10. As this happens, they then leave, going back to the magic shop owner's place, as they then make Naofumi, Philo's dress, which she can make to transform with her body, making it a lot more convenient to transform and untransform. After a few days of staying at the royal capital, they are told that there is that they need to take a herbicide to a village. With this being explained, Naofumi's kind of party arrived to the village, which was supposed to be very riddled and destroyed by a massive drought. However, there is a bunch of plants and vines destroying the place, covering the entire village. With Naofumi asking what's going on, the village kind of chief, or the village leader, explains that the spear hero Moriyasu came in here a few days earlier, maybe a week earlier, and gave them a seed to help them with all their problems, to help them end their local famine. However, the sprouted plant became kind of alive and started attacking the villagers. Naofumi, hearing this, decides that he should probably help, and maybe if he defeats this plant, he can get a new ability from it. So, Naofumi goes kind of towards the plant. As they arrive, seeing a gigantic tree with a big eye in the middle of it, but it isn't a normal tree, it's just weird. It's a grotesque, mutated and just disgusting tree. It shouldn't be here. As Naofumi charges towards it, using his butterflies to use poison needles to shoot towards the shoot at the tree, starting to poison it. Philo, using her kind of kicks and attacks, using her different quill attacks, which, since Naofumi has gotten that poison, she has also gotten a level 1 poison ability as well. Therefore, her quills have now got poison, now poison coated as well. Therefore, it kind of damaging the monster tree and the monster plant as well. Raftalia, using her different sorts of magic, figuring out her light and dark magic, and trying to damage it with burning it or kind of slicing at the monster. As this happens, Naofumi throws a bunch of his moths and butterflies towards the giant monster, the giant tree monster. However, as they arrive, they start kind of getting on it and starts to poison it. It's shriveling down. It's starting to dying, with it trying to attack, it hitting Philo into one of the buildings, her going flying through them and coming out the other side. As she goes for Raftalia, Naofumi jumps in front of her, putting his claws up and slicing up the giant vine that was going for Raftalia. As this happens, he then uses some more moths and poisons to poison the giant tree, with him then trying to absorb it with his magic, or with his poison and his butterfly moth thingies. As that happens, he then finally kills the monster after a very challenging fight. As the big tree monster is defeated, Naofumi tries to absorb it as well to see what abilities he can get from it. As he uses his butterflies and moths to try and absorb it, it finally absorbs after a long wait. With him getting these different kind of claws. They're strange. They've got like this viney kind of rose effect with some strange thorns across them, with him being told that he's got two different types of them. One of them being a lot more decayed and kind of grotesque, and others being more vine and thorn-like. The thorn kind of vine ones being more like a sapping attack, where once the opponent is hit, vines will appear on the opponent, sapping their energy. The other one being more of a poison ability, with it slowly taking away damage every few seconds. As he sees this, he is quite happy with this, with his poison kind of abilities and his poison proficiency going up in multiple more levels. His other kind of abilities getting a lot stronger, and him getting some more plant-based attacks, and having a more nature-filled proficiency as well. After he kind of absorbs the entire tree, he then sees the giant cursed, or not giant, but the cursed seed on the ground, as he thinks, since he's got the strange moth kaiju's abilities, maybe he could try and take kind of the cursed seed and make it better, make it so it won't spawn a giant ruthless monster tree, and be more like a fertilizing tree and seed that can help the people. So he uses a sort of poison, but less of a potent murder poison and more of a helpful poison that doesn't kill people. So he uses it on the seed, making it less vicious and deadly and more fertile and better, as he gives it to the village elder, explaining that he will get this kind of seed and it will spring a lot more fruit and a lot quicker. However, it will not be instant and you will have to wait. It will just be a lot quicker than some normal seeds would be, or normal food would be. The village elder thanking him immensely as they head off. They then are given a kind of quest to go and drop some merchandise off to some hot springs, with them arriving, dropping off the package and staying the night there. After that, they head off, as they then hear about this strange disease that is going through a village, like a mountain village, which is kind of strange. As they arrive to go investigate the disease, and they are told that the sword hero Rin had killed a dragon up on the mountain nearby and just left the body to rot instead of actually disposing of it, with monsters gathering around kind of its corpse and decomposing the body, and rendered the area quite toxic, and making the villagers and the people that stay there for long periods of time a lot sicker. Well, not a lot sicker, but just very sick in general. Naofumi's party set off towards the corpse, trying to dispose of it very quickly. As they go up and see the corpse, they realize that they should probably cover their faces, so they do so, making sure they don't get sick. Naofumi, for some reason, doesn't need to worry about it, same with Philo. However, Raftalia does, as once they get up to it, they prepare to kind of dispose of the body. Naofumi prepares to use his butterflies and moths to pretty much absorb the body. However, before he can, the body resurrects. It starts getting up, which confuses them. As it starts moving, it stands up and starts attacking them, it being a zombified dragon. As they kind of start fighting it, it attacks it using its claws and tail to try and attack them. Raftalia trying to swing and attack at it, but it's no use. Philo, being really mad that it's a dragon, tries to attack it, with Naofumi using his claws and his kind of eye beams to shoot and slice through the thing, also using his quills and different poisoned attacks to try and defeat the dragon, using his leech seed to sap away the dragon's energy. However, it is not enough. As Philo jumps in to attack the dragon, it then moves its head, swallowing Philo. As Naofumi, seeing this, feels an unconsiderable amount of rage, and undescribable. His eyes turning a blue color, it's starting to glow, his veins starting to bulge and kind of pump through with some strange turquoise or cyan blood running through it, some strange cyan markings running through his body, and his skin starting to turn a grey color as his kind of body starts contorting and morphing into a more monstrous look. As this happens, he uses his poisons. He uses everything in his disposal, using his shadow claws, his poisons, his decaying, all of his abilities he can, he attacks the monster with, leeching away his energy while also poisoning it. As this happens, they then see a spike slice through the inside of the monster's body. With this happening, a giant quill rips through the monster's, or the dragon's stomach, ripping it open as the skin starts to kind of soften. As that happens, the monster then explodes, with Philo jumping out of the body with blood soaking her body. As this happens, they see that she is furious. However, as soon as Naofumi sees it, he is a lot happier. He starts calming down, with Philo doing the same. It's almost like, since they are both connected, and since they're both kind of kaiju kind of things, or something like that, they seem to be linked, since if Naofumi gets a lot angrier, Philo was getting a lot angrier. So, they're all very happy that Philo is still alive. As this happens, Philo then points out that there's a strange shard in the monster's body. As that happens, Naofumi goes up to it and grabs it, absorbing the shard into his body and gaining a lot more abilities, using his butterflies and different kind of moths and different kind of insects to absorb the rest of the dragon, gaining multiple more abilities, getting more decaying abilities. He's getting a new level called Decay, which is at level 2 from absorbing the dragon. He also has the ability to summon said dragon if need be, and he also gets a massive strength boost. His strength, speed, and all of his stats getting a gigantic boost in power and strength, and just getting a large boost in levels overall. Him getting a new claw, which allows him to decay things as soon as it makes contact, and makes any contact with the skin and with any sort of material, as if it strikes any armor, the armor will decay slowly, and if it strikes the skin and flesh, that will decay as well. The decay being level 2, as I think I already explained, and him getting some other abilities as well, getting some strange flame claws as well, since it used to be a fire dragon, so he gets some flame claws which are level 1. His other claws getting a massive boost in levels, and he just gets considerably stronger, with Raftalia and Philo getting a lot stronger as well. After defeating the monster, they then head back to the village and giving them the cure. Him using his poisons and his different nature abilities from defeating Mothra to be able to create a sort of antidote for the poison and the toxin that the dragon was releasing, therefore curing all of the villagers. After this, Naofumi's party head for the royal capital to get their class upgrades. After this, after a long journey, they stop for a break and see a blue-haired girl playing with some filolials. As this happens, Philo gets really excited and runs towards her. As the girl turns around, almost scared, but also intrigued that this is a weird filolial. Like, why has it got spikes and different quills on it instead of feathers? It's pretty sick. But Philo then explains that she is a filolial for the Kaiju hero Naofumi, who Naofumi greets them, and Multi is greeted to the rest of the party, with her asking Naofumi if she could take her to the royal capital, with Naofumi saying sure, why not. So they do that, with Multi and Philo getting really close, becoming good friends. Once they arrive to the royal capital, Naofumi's party and Multi go their own ways. After they split ways, Naofumi decides to treat Philo and Raftalia a bit before they go to get their class upgrades, with him letting them go around to the different shops and see what's there. As the three of them are strolling around the square, Naofumi then senses something going towards him, as a gigantic attack hits him square on, hitting him straight in the shoulder before dispersing, leaving him there completely unaffected, as all he has is a few scorch and scratches on him, not really that affected, only being moved back a few centimeters or inches. As he turns to his right, he sees the spear hero Moriyasu once again trying to pick a fight, as he yells at Naofumi, asking why did he get another slave, and why did he have this this little girl as a slave. Like, he couldn't just live with having one girl as a slave. He had to get one little girl as well, with Naofumi just holding his head in just disappointment, just face palming really, as Moriyasu prepares to attack Naofumi. He charges forward, with Mine permitting the attack. Naofumi dodging the attack before punching him square in the side, sending him flying into a nearby building, cracking the wall. As Moriyasu's about to go for another attack, they then hear somebody yell for them to stop, as they both turn around to see Melty walking towards them, with multiple soldiers and guards trailing behind her. Naofumi explained that she is the queen, or the second heir, or the first in line and the second daughter, and this fight is no longer permitted. With Naofumi hearing this, he decides to just leave and goes to Earhart to get Philo and the rest of his party some more weapons and equipment if they need it. While they're there, Multi then arrives and tells them that she is the second princess, and sorry for possibly deceiving them if they thought that, and that she just didn't really want to give away the fact that she was the second princess or anything like that. Naofumi explaining that it is fine, and she doesn't seem like a treacherous and scheming little bastard like the other two are, so she seems alright. Naofumi then leaving as they go to get their class upgrades at the glass tower. Hourglass. As they arrive, they then go up to ask for the class upgrades. However, they are then told that a royal decree forbids the monstrous demon hero, as they call it, or the Kaiju hero, from using Melmarak's Dragon Hourglass. After this, Naofumi decides that if he's not going to get it here, he will try and head for Shield Frieden to get their Hourglass, as they decide to go forwards. As this happens, Naofumi goes to different other places and other villages, finding out that on the edge of their village there has been starving refugees and a destroyed town who fled a revolution started by the bow hero Itsuki. With Naofumi realizing that the next wave is going to be in a mere couple days, Naofumi decides to head back to Melmarak, where he then encounters Ren and Itsuki at the bar. When he kind of arrives, they then complain that both of their kind of quests were taken by someone else, and Naofumi just snickers at this. Ren and Itsuki then come towards him, asking if he was the one, and he explains that he pretty much saved the people, with them accusing him of stealing their rewards. And Naofumi explains that Itsuki's revolution only put a new government and corrupt tyrant in front and is leading the country, as pretty much they traded a tyrant for another tyrant. And with Ren, he left a slain dragon's corpse behind, which caused a plague, killing and affecting hundreds of different people at a nearby village. After this, Itsuki kind of remains kind of angry at... They both kind of seem angry at Naofumi and explains that he's lying. After this, he kind of heads back to Earhart, where Naofumi gets upgraded armor and different kind of abilities and different armors and equipment. They are then asked by multiple other people, by some soldiers, if they can join the party, and Naofumi just says sure, not asking for any money since he's a little bit more trusting, but explains that they cannot get in his way, as he then gives them 150 silvers to buy better gear with the money. After a few hours and equipping the rest of his party with Raftalia, Philo, and the rest of the kind of knights and the soldiers that decide to join his party, the wave finally starts, as Naofumi gets the soldiers and the different guards to help civilians kind of leave the premises and evacuate, with Naofumi and his party taking down all the monsters, killing them all down, with Naofumi taking down a bunch of different monsters. And after about 3 hours, nothing happens. The wave doesn't end, as Naofumi worries about what's the other heroes doing. Like, why aren't they just ending this? So he asks the rest of the guards and the rest of the people helping the city and the village if he can leave and if they're fine here, as they tell him that he is all good, as they go charge or go find the different heroes. As he arrives to the different heroes, he sees a giant ship up in the air. As he jumping into the ship with his other party members, they then see the different heroes attacking a bunch of monsters, as it's pretty much endless. They're arguing about what the different villains and what the boss is, as one of them says that it's this, one of them says that it's that, with Naofumi realizing that it's in the shadows as he stabs his claw into the shadow of Motoyasu, ripping out something, as it is a Soul Eater. He rips it out and slices at it flying away, with moths and butterflies flying off of Naofumi. Them flying around and going around the Soul Eater as it lands on them. Or they land on it, as the Soul Eater starts glowing before it then is absorbed, it poofing away, with Naofumi getting the ability Soul Eater, where he can suck the soul out of anything if he has a solid enough grip and has enough time. Him sucking the soul out and getting a lot stronger with it. As he does this, he then sees a second Soul Eater for some reason as it arrives and prepares to attack them, before it is then crushed by a gigantic kind of fist, something like that. Him looking up to see a gigantic monster, a gigantic kaiju with kind of a smooth kind of design, black skin and red slitted eyes, with multiple different limbs and some weird wing looking things on its back. As before he could say anything or really react, it looks up to the sky as a strange pulse blasts out from its back, sending kind of strange electrical particles flying into Naofumi's party members. But the rest of the heroes wondering what's going on. All they saw was the second Soul Eater before it was crushed and just vanished and went away, just dispersing. And then saw Naofumi and his party get hit by something. They look like they've been affected by something. As Naofumi tries to use his magic, he can't. Only his natural claws are working. He can't use any of his magic attacks. As it happens, the Muto goes in for another attack, going in to slam and attack them, trying to slice at them with its claws. However, it's not quick enough, as Naofumi quickly regains his magical abilities using his different claws and abilities, using his one of the abilities that he got from the plant monster, gaining giant vine claws, wrapping it around the Muto, dragging it to the ground and dragging its head into the ship, causing it to hit the ship and be stuck there. Naofumi then getting his two other party members, Philo and Raftalia, to attack it. Philo using her claws and her different kind of attacks to slice at it. Raftalia using her kind of light, dark, and other forms of magic and attacks, and Naofumi using his decay claws on his other claw, using his decay claw to rip and decay the monster, while also using a leech kind of attack to drain its abilities and strength and give it back to Naofumi and his party, and starting to poison it, before finishing it off with a eye beam, or at least that's what it seems, as he shoots the eye beam at the Muto. However, it doesn't do a lot, as it rips its head out of the vines and slaps Philo, sending her flying off of the ship and onto the ground far below. As this happens, Naofumi gets infuriated, using his different abilities, using his fire claws to jump up and slice down at the Muto, before then putting his hand up, his palm up to the sky, as a strange glow appears from it, before something forms behind him. A gigantic dragon, a fire dragon, as it charges towards the Muto, hitting it, ripping it apart, and using pretty much it being even with the Muto, attacking it, slicing at it, burning at it. But the Muto being kind of surprised. The dragon being smaller than the Muto, but not by too much. As the dragon attacks it, using its different attacks, Naofumi uses his different vines and other abilities to trap and restrain the beast, while the others, or while Raftalia, attacks it as well. For the final blow, Philo comes in, using her sharpened claws to slice down at the Muto, chopping through its throat, causing it to be unable to breathe, before Naofumi then uses his eye beams to blast down through the Muto's throat and into its mouth, killing the beast. As this happens, he immediately uses his butterflies to take its abilities, him getting multiple different abilities, like being able to absorb nuclear and bioatomic kind of radiation and pretty much bioatomic nature, him getting a new set of claws, these being gigantic black and sharpened claws, him having a lot more durability, his durability and endurance levels being raised up considerably, him getting echolocation, being able to hear things from around the area, him getting the kind of magical pulse, being able to disable magic for a small periods of time, being able to fly properly, him not being able to fly really with Mothra's small wings, but able to properly fly by combining the Muto's wings and Mothra's wings, giving him proper flight. Him also having a lot higher kind of levels raised in speed and agility, stamina and strength. Him just getting a whole lot higher levels overall, being up to level 40 still. But his abilities getting a lot stronger. As this happens, the rest of the heroes are kind of shocked, wondering what happened, before another Soul Eater appears. As it goes in to attack them, it is then sliced up and torn apart, as one of the heroes looks up to see that there is a woman up at the kind of stern of the ship. As they look up, Ren notices them as he charges towards them, not thinking about it. As he charges towards her, he swings down his sword before getting whacked back by a fan, it looks like. The fan whacks him back before the woman shortens the fan into a blade looking thing and throws it at Rin's knee, stabbing straight into it before it expanding, pretty much tearing apart all the tendons and the muscles in Rin's knee, pretty much crippling him. As that happens, the blade then gets flung back into the woman's hand. Her explaining that her name is Glass and she has been sent here to kill all of them. As that happens, she then goes in to attack the nearest people, Naofumi and Raftalia and Philo. As that happens, they are able to dodge it before Itsuki and Motoyasu go in to attack her, but it doesn't do a lot. As they go in to use all of their atomic and meteoric strikes, trying to blast her away, it doesn't do anything. Rin even jumping in as well, using his atomic kind of slash as well, but it doesn't do anything. As she blasts them away, sending them flying and dazing them for a small bit. After this, Naofumi then charges towards her, using his different abilities to restrain and poison her, using his new soul ability to try and drain the soul out of her, seeing that it is kind of effective, but not superly effective. Being able to drain kind of the soul out of somebody, but not enough since he's not experienced enough with this ability. Him only being able to drain a little bit before she is able to push him back. After this, she then goes in to attack him using multiple other abilities, but him being able to dodge and block the attacks before using his different leech seeds and poisonous vines to wrap and restrain her and limit her movements and take her down, really. As he's ready to attack her again, going in for a slice, she blasts him and the rest of his party away before she then starts being dragged back up into the sky. Her explaining that she may have been out of time this time, but she will not lose again. As she floats back up into the sky, the rest of the wave ending soon after that. After seeing that the woman, whose name was stated to be Glass, left and was sucked back up into the wave, Naofumi immediately rushes towards Rin, trying to heal his knee, making sure that he doesn't stay a cripple for the rest of his life, even though he probably will. As that kind of happens, he uses his different butterflies and different poisons and natural abilities that he got from Mothra and other kind of plants and all of those to be able to kind of try and heal Rin's knee. As he's able to heal it enough for Rin to almost lean on it, however he won't be able to walk or fight the same way again for a long while. As that happens, they are then taken to the king's room where they are kind of congratulated. They're all congratulated apart from Naofumi. The king pretty much demanding that Naofumi tell him how he's got the strong and why he's so strong and how did he get all these abilities. Naofumi telling him that if he wants to know, he should get on his knees and beg, grovel at his feet, and then he might think about telling him. After this, the king pretty much tells him, well, if you won't tell me, and I know I can't hurt you, but I can hurt your party members. Hearing this, Naofumi appears in front of the king, having his claw up to the king's throat, stating, if you're gonna even think about touching my party members, I'll tear your throat out, and no one in this room would be able to stop me. Absolutely shaking in his boots, the king just stops as Naofumi walks away, taking the money that he was deserved and walking towards the doors, as the king calls out, "Ha! Like you're ever gonna be able to lay a finger on me. You'll be murdered before you can even try." As before he can even finish the sentence, Naofumi turns around and blasts the king's knee and leg off with one of his eye lasers, completely incinerating it, leaving everyone there in complete shock and almost fear as Naofumi walks off, the king just holding down at his destroyed leg, it going all the way up to his knee, as he's going to have a little stump there for the rest of his life, as he's holding there just in pain. After leaving the room, he is then approached by this maiden, which she then walks up to him, giving him some sort of pendant before then leaving, explaining a certain kind of phrase to him before leaving Naofumi a bit confused, as Naofumi decides to head to Xplic to get his class upgrades for him and his party. As soon as he does this, he kind of heads out, heading on the road before he is tracked down and approached by Melty. As Melty arrives, she explains, questioning, why did he shoot her father's leg off which kind of confused her. As she asked us, he explains that, well, he kind of threatened his party, and threatened to kill his party and him, and pretty much just threatened to... Spoiler alert, your father's a bit of a poo, really. Like, he's a bit dumb. As she's a bit taken aback by this, but before she can respond, Naofumi charges forward in front of her, blocking an attack from one of the knights. Him using his claws to slice straight through the guard's, or the soldier's chest, ripping out his intestines and his insides and his organs, and ripping them from his body, tossing the man to the ground, and then charging towards the rest of them as the other guards try to attack him and his party. As this happens, she tries, Philo protects Multi as Raftalia and Naofumi take down and literally murder all of the guards, tearing them limb from limb, ripping them apart, and just killing all of them with no remorse or mercy. As that happens, Multi's a bit surprised, but can understand why they did that, as to pretty much get away, they charge and run away immediately, getting out of there, as it is revealed, and they're told that, or the rest of the people are told, that Naofumi has kidnapped the princess and needs to be taken down and taken away. As that happens, they are on the kind of run for a few weeks, really, or not a few weeks, but a few days, until one day they are walking across a path and Multi slips and kind of falls from one of the rocks, breaking underneath her. Naofumi grabbing onto her and catching her, but they were heard as the soldiers and the heroes who were chasing him, which was Rin, Itsuki, and Motoyasu. Rin still having a bit of a limp, but still able to fight enough, with Mine also being there. As this happens, they are chased to an edge of a cliff, with a path going further. However, they have to jump before making it. As that happens, they are Mine tells some BS lie that he is able to, Naofumi is able to brainwash people, and that is one of his monstrous abilities. Naofumi just telling them straightforward, I truthfully do not get where your delusions come from, but oh well, you're insane enough, it makes sense. As while that's happening, Mine ends up throwing a fireball towards Multi, with Naofumi sending out his moths and bugs and different insects and butterflies to block the attack, it creating a shield and pretty much dispersing the attack immediately. As that happens, the rest of the people are completely surprised that she would just attack Multi like that, as Naofumi just dashes towards Mine, grabbing her by the throat before pretty much injecting his claws into her throat, as poison sickles into it, poisoning her as her neck starts to decay and rot, before he grabs her by the head and rips her head clear off. As this happens, he then uses his soul eating ability, grabbing into her chest and ripping out her soul, absorbing it into himself, killing Mine forever. After this, the rest of the people are very just shocked and confused and just an absolute horror of what Naofumi just did, but he then grabs the pendant that was given to him from the kind of lady as he tosses it to Rin, telling him that he will understand, as he runs off with the others. After another day or so of travelling, they then arrive at a nobleman's place, which Melty knows, called Nobleman Van Richnot, who rules the area, him taking them in with open arms and taking care of them for the night. As that happens, they are then given watch as Naofumi and the rest of the kind of party are woken up by multiple kind of soldiers barging into the manor and another lord charging in, this man being Nobleman Idol Raybear. As that happens, Melty makes a distraction as her and Van Richnot are then taken by kind of Lord Raybear and taken back to his different manor. After seeing that Melty and Lord Reichnot was pretty much taken and arrested by the other Lord Raybear, Naofumi decides to go and save her with some convincing needed from Raftalia and Philo. Once they get there, they pretty much just spearhead straight through, taking down all the guards, pretty much killing them, or killing a lot of them, and finally arriving at the Lord Raybear's kind of room where he's holding Melty, trying to get her to tell him where Naofumi is. Once this happens, kind of Raftalia tells him straight up that, or hints at it, that he was the one that imprisoned her, as she goes in and tries to kill him, going in and stabbing at him, cutting at him, and the guy really doesn't stand a chance until she slices at him, slicing across his chest, causing the man to fall back out of the window. Naofumi saying that it was necessary and that the guy needed to die for what he had done, and after this they unstrap Lord Reichnot and go down to the prison and the different basements, where they see kind of Philo's old friend, or not Philo, Raftalia's old friend, and save everyone from that catastrophe. After this, they hear a rumbling and see a giant Tyrannosaurus-like dragon rumbling through the streets with a flattened Lord Raybear on the pavement. As they see this, Naofumi orders Lord Reichnot to get everyone out of there, as he, Philo, and Raftalia will go after, and Melty will go after the dragon. As this happens, they all use their multiple different attacks. Raftalia using her light attacks, Naofumi using his poisons and decaying abilities and his other kind of claws, and Philo using her wind and kind of spikes and different kicking and other attacks, them taking it down pretty easily since they have taken down Kaiju before. As that happens, Naofumi absorbs the monster and gets some new abilities, getting a lot stronger and faster, and just his levels skyrocketing once again. After this, they get a strange voice in their head telling them to go to these certain coordinates, where they see a gigantic filolial. This filolial explaining that her name is Vittoria, and she is the filolial queen, and she pretty much wants to see if Philo is right to be the next in line. After this, everyone's kind of surprised as they are all taken to Vittoria's home, where Vittoria explains that the heroes need to be on the same track. Naofumi explaining that, well, the bow and the sword are alright, they're not that bad. However, the spear hero is too stubborn and pretty much clouded by his love, and his judgment is just clouded by all that love and pretty much attraction and obsession with one of the princesses, that he can't get through to him. With Victoria saying that she has only been able to look after the rest of the countries while they take care of the others, or while they take care of Xplic. They then continue talking about it, and Naofumi agrees that he will try his absolute hardest to keep the rest of the he will try his hardest to reunite all of the 4 heroes, and her saying thank you, even though he isn't a shield hero that he was supposed to be. Maybe he is more than what they hoped for. Maybe he is better. After this, they all go to bed, and during this time, Victoria also explained that since she wants Philo to be the next queen, she needs to test her, and she explains her entire plan. Naofumi going along with it. During this time, after this, Naofumi and everyone wakes up with Victoria trapping all the heroes, like everyone apart from Philo and her, inside of a bubble, as pretty much Multi is taken hostage and Philo is told by Victoria that if she does not fight and defeat Victoria, then Multi will pay the price. Through this, Philo tries her absolute hardest, using her multiple different attacks, using her spikes, her kicks, her wind magic, everything in her arsenal. Finally, after a long fight, she is able to land a scratch with her poison coated kind of needles into Victoria's arm, slicing it just a slight bit, but that is enough for her to go down on one knee, feeling the effects of the poison immediately. After this, they are then told that Philo has passed, and that she is a capable warrior, and will surely be a good queen in the future. Even though she is a bit strange, she's surely what they need. After this, she explains that she will take, pretty much teleport them to the nearest hero, in which Naofumi thanks him and just hopes in his mind that it isn't Motoyasu, as he goes up to the kind of wall, seeing that it is heavily blockaded, and seeing that one of the heroes are there. As he walks closer to the building and to the wall, he walks up, seeing that it is not Itsuki and it is not Ren. It is Motoyasu, the spear hero.
So what we pick up is Naofumi is just gotten transported to the closest hero, and it ends up being Motoyasu. And Motoyasu, upon seeing Naofumi, is immediately pissed off, has no type of words that could even begin to describe the rage that Motoyasu is feeling. However, Naofumi comes to talk, as he says, "Motoyasu, you need to listen to me. I think it's time that us heroes start working together. Motoyasu, you need to get this through your head. We need each other." As Motoyasu just says, "Then why did you kill mine, you monster?" As he rushes straight at Naofumi and his party close behind him. However, they're rather timid. They really don't want to tangle with someone that killed their second strongest member behind Motoyasu like it was nothing. And so Naofumi just grabs Motoyasu's spear, and even though it does electrocute him, he powers through it, slamming Motoyasu into the ground, grabbing him by the throat and about to collapse his windpipe. but then he remembers what he was told. And before anything else can happen, Philo says, "We need to get out of here right now. Something big is coming our way," as Naofumi can sense it, and so he grabs Motoyasu and jumps out of the way, as everyone ends up evading the attack. There were no casualties even amongst Motoyasu's party, and they look up and see the priest, as the priest begins monologuing, and Naofumi's not really listening. Instead, he still has Motoyasu by the throat, and he says, "Look, we can either work together or I can kill you here. It's your choice." As Motoyasu realizes he's in no situation to bargain. He's gonna die if Naofumi doesn't help him, and if he doesn't help Naofumi, he's still gonna die. There is no other choice but to go along with what Naofumi wants him to do. And so, Motoyasu just shakes his head in agreement, and Naofumi lets him go as he starts gasping for air. As Naofumi just says, "So what do you want, priest?" As he says, "Wait, what? Priest? I'm the Pope, you imbecile." And Naofumi says, "Pope, priest, what's the difference?" As he says, "You know what? I will not tolerate this, and I am not going to take the time to explain it to a simple-minded monster like yourself." Naofumi then orders Motoyasu's party to actually form a party with him instead, as he can get a boost strong enough to actually take out this guy in one shot if he has enough members. And since Motoyasu's not really in the mood to say no, they oblige Naofumi. But the Pope really doesn't give them the time to, as he starts attacking over and over and over again, putting everyone on the defensive, even Naofumi, who's surprised how strong this blast actually is, as it's actually searing him, as he says, "This is not what I expected. You're actually not a bad fight." As Naofumi starts to grin, and he's like, "Wait a minute, when did I start thinking like this?" As he can feel the two kaiju inside of him craving the battle. They want to kill this guy. They need to. Their instincts are telling them they need to kill him now. As Naofumi sees a new skill appear called Kaijufication, as he just presses it, saying, "Oh well, it can only help." As his body starts to morph, as his skin turns gray, and has almost as if its armor come onto it with green lines everywhere, going all over his face. He ends up transforming into exactly what is on the thumbnail, a humanoid kaiju. And this actually comes at a price, as Naofumi's mental state is in a constant flux of imbalance. It's like the kaiju spirit has possessed his body, and his humanity is slowly being corroded away. That's the payoff. And so Naofumi ends up blitzing the priest, or Pope, whatever you want to call him, as the two of them are actually on equal footing. Naofumi is just swatting away the blast. The rest of the party is in utter shock. They had no idea that this was even possible. How strong is Naofumi at this current moment? And so the priest ends up actually sacrificing half of his followers to summon something. And since Motoyasu's party is in a party with Naofumi, they see it. The sky starts to darken as lightning comes from the sky, and they hear it, a terrifying roar. Even those outside of Naofumi's party can tell something is coming, something incredibly strong, something terrifying, as they see three heads emerge from the clouds, a giant body as Naofumi says, "It can't be. Not him. He's the one that took everything from me." As he says, "Ghidorah." As Naofumi is enraged, seeing Ghidorah in this world, flashbacks of his world, all of his friends, his family, even the kids he took in, all of them dying to this monster. Naofumi loses it as he immediately just punches a hole straight through the priest and rips his head right off. As the priest's body just hits the ground, Naofumi is not in control. He is going off pure animalistic rage, fury, and instinct as he immediately engages Ghidorah. And the fight is not anywhere near even, not at all. As Naofumi is getting beaten and battered, but then almost instinctively, the pure rage coming off of him activates his curse series as everything goes red and red lightning starts to pulsate off of Naofumi as it's just unbelievable. Motoyasu had no idea that Naofumi could be this terrifying. As Ren and Itsuki come into the fray, they see the priest is dead and Naofumi is seemingly out of control. And as soon as Naofumi jumps into the air, they see it. For the first time, they can actually get a visualization of what Naofumi has been fighting. As they see a outline, a golden outline of Ghidorah, who hits Naofumi with 3 lightning breath attacks, sending him to the ground, and Philo and Raftalia can't stand it anymore. They enter the fray as Philo, with her spiky feathers, charges, as Naofumi is just yelling, "No!" As Philo just says, "I will protect you, Master Naofumi," as she jumps, racing towards Ghidorah, who is then tearing Philo apart. She's ripped into thirds and eaten by each of the 3 heads of Ghidorah. As that finally breaks Naofumi, he fully gives in to the kaiju, subconsciously, fully. As Naofumi just says, "I want to go to sleep." And inside his mind, while the battle rages on, he sees himself in his own world before anything ever happened. He's with his family. He's with the kids that he took in. They're at the park. The kids are playing. Naofumi is sitting with his mother, and they're talking. As she says, "I'm so glad you got the day off." As Naofumi says, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing." And she says, "Well, yeah, saving the world is a full-time job, isn't it?" As Naofumi says, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Oh, don't be silly. You're part of the Special Defense Force, aren't you? After all, it's very rare that you guys get leave. So tell me, what's the interesting topic today?" As Naofumi says, "I don't really remember." She says, "Oh, are you feeling alright?" As Naofumi says, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just gonna lie down for a little bit, rest my head. I think I just had a super bizarre dream. I was in some other world and they called me a hero or something, and I was fighting a giant monster that they called a kaiju. Some pope or priest, whatever, tried to kill me. But that's about as much as I can remember. And she says, my, maybe you should become a writer. That would be an amazing story to tell." As Naofumi says, "Yeah, well, maybe I will. Maybe I will." As Naofumi lays there for a few minutes, a boy comes up to him, along with a girl, and they say, "Is this what you've always wanted?" And Naofumi says, what are you talking about? As the boy says, you know this isn't real, right? And the girl says, you're dreaming. You have to wake up. As Naofumi says, what? No, I can't be dreaming. See, I can pinch myself and, yep, still here. As they said, is that truly what you wish for? As Naofumi says, what do you mean? As they say, you couldn't have forgotten, not this quickly. As they show Naofumi the background, cities burning, roars being heard, children screaming. As Naofumi looks back over there and sees his mother set ablaze and burning, but all she can say is, how is work? Naofumi is mentally tortured as he says, no, I fought my battle. I did my best. I don't care anymore. Just let me rest. As they say, you know we can't do that. You know you have no choice. We know you wanted a sweet dream, but reality is often cruel. It's time to wake up. Naofumi. As Naofumi just says, fine. I'm awake. No more dreaming. As he awakens to see just in time Raphtalia jump in front of him before Ghidorah can kill her. However, Naofumi blitzes her back to safety as he sees the other people in his party still alive, but he doesn't see Philo. As he asks what happened to Philo, Motoyasu, Ren, and Itsuki all say it ate her. And Naofumi says, oh, you're joking. She couldn't have been. And they say, we're sorry, Naofumi, but she's gone. As Naofumi's mind is just set ablaze. He's angry. Angry at the world, angry at Ghidorah, the priest, the church, it doesn't matter. He's just angry. But most of all, he's angry at himself. And so, Naofumi, not caring about other people's lives anymore, activates one of his Curse series special skills, Blood Sacrifice. However, this one is slightly different, since it is for the Kaiju hero. Kaijus do not sacrifice themselves, but sacrifice others. And so, all of Motayasu's party members get sacrificed for the new blood sacrifice skill, as their bodies are torn asunder and blood flows onto the ground, all coming towards Naofumi, who's in his Kaiju state and absorbing all of it. All of their levels, their XP, they all increase Naofumi's strength by a lot. He shoots all the way up to level 150. And with this, he knows he's enough. He launches up at Ghidorah, the wings sprouting from Mothra, using one of the skills he acquired from the Muto, Magic Erasure, where he sets off an EMP-like pulse that disrupts any magic. And that shuts down Ghidorah's attacks for a little bit, as Naofumi digs his feet into the back of Ghidorah and raises his fist up high as his elbow opens up and shoots out a lot of energy, which increases the velocity as he smacks into Ghidorah's back, actually punching a hole straight through the Kaiju, crashing down. However, it starts to regenerate from the prayers of the people of the church, all praying for Ghidorah's victory over the devilish Kaiju hero. Motoyasu, pissed beyond belief, says, "I've had it with churches," as he goes on a killing spree. However, it's not fast enough, so Ren and Itsuki decide to help. Together, all three of the other heroes slaughter the remaining church members as Ghidorah's regeneration stops. as Naofumi begins his onslaught, punch after punch, just tearing into Ghidorah, his rage finally having a target, getting revenge for every life that Ghidorah has taken. Everything has finally led to this moment, and Naofumi finishes it off. But just then, Naofumi de-transforms out of SP, and his HP, which had been rapidly burned through because of the kaiju form, requiring some sort of sacrifice. First, it was going off of his SP, but then switched to HP whenever that was empty. And so the queen then arrives with her royal guards, ordering them to round up any surviving members of the church, even though there weren't any, as all of the heroes were taken to the castle's infirmary, where Naofumi finally went to sleep. However, he did not dream. Naofumi awoke a few days later, having recovered and actually not having any curses upon him this time. And so, a council was held. However, Naofumi would be brought to trial for the murder of Mine. And so, he is. But the queen decides to pardon him. The king is bewildered, saying, how could she pardon someone who killed her own daughter? And then the queen speaks, saying that how can he defend a daughter that tried to kill her younger sister? The king says that those are false charges. There was never any proof of that. However, the other heroes come up and do testify against Mine for the plot of trying to kill Melty. And Motiyasu is one that testifies against Mine as well, finally seeing the type of person that she truly was in life. This is actually the first step in all of the heroes working together, although Motiyasu can never truly forgive Naofumi for what he did to his party. And so, Motiyasu, before he could even set out, the queen calls for him and says that she will replace all of the party members that Naofumi sacrificed to defeat that monster. As Motiyasu just says, keep it. I don't need any of your damn sympathy, and I'm done with this country pulling me around. I'm going elsewhere. Don't even try to stop me. As he begins to walk away, as the queen says, well, that's much too bad. You really could have benefited from this archipelago event that I was about to explain. But if you don't want to hear it and you truly wish to leave, I will not stop you. Naofumi would then smirk as he knew Motiyasu was caught, hook, line, and sinker. As Motiyasu says, well, maybe I'll leave a little bit later. Go ahead and tell me what you were wanting to. As the queen says, I will, but first, let us hold a council of the 4 heroes. Motiyasu says, and there it is. Fine, I'll play your little political game. As all of the heroes sit down and they want to know how Naofumi got so strong. As Naofumi says, well, it's kind of a little bit tricky. I've had extra boss battles. You guys have not. As the kaiju hero, I have to fight kaijus at every wave, which means at the next wave, I'll be fighting another kaiju. However, I don't know how strong the next one's actually gonna be. After all, I just took down the king of the monsters, Ghidorah, right? As the queen says, not quite. There is a legend, deep in mystery, but it did speak of Ghidorah. And while he was considered a kaiju by your terms, by ours, he most definitely was not. As Naofumi says, what do you mean? And then he thinks back. I didn't get anything from Ghidorah. As she says, exactly. That's because Ghidorah is an alien. However, the people who could not see him wasn't because they weren't in your party. It's because, well, they were too low leveled. As all the other heroes were like, but we saw his outline. And she says, yes, but you were too low leveled to see anything else. If he had attacked you, then, well, you would have certainly have died. As they're all just sulking, but they can't really argue with it. As Naofumi says, then wait a minute, how could Motayasu's party see them? And she says, they were in your party. And in this case, since you're the kaiju hero, does your party not see what you see? As Naofumi thinks about this and realizes that all the other kaiju that he's fought, his party was able to see them despite not being a kaiju hero themselves. And he says, I guess you're right. And so the queen continues on with her brief and cryptic message, saying that Ghidorah was once dethroned by a natural earth-born kaiju named Godzilla. As Naofumi's eyes widen, saying that there's no way Godzilla could exist here. Godzilla's dead. Ghidorah killed him in my world. And the queen says, well, to be fair, that wasn't Godzilla in your world. That was an imposter called Zilla. As Naofumi says, what now? And the queen says, it's best not to dwell on that one. Just know Godzilla may very well show up. You're strong, and the strong have a right to challenge the king. As Naofumi sits back in his chair, thinking that if what was back in his world, named Zilla, was so strong that Naofumi never even thought it'd be possible to beat him, what type of monster is Godzilla? And so the rest of the meeting goes pretty cordial. The queen explains about the archipelago as the ship sets out, as Naofumi and Raftalia set out after holding a funeral for Philo, as Philo is held in the most highest degree and Melty is broken down and refuses to leave her room. The queen understands the sentiment and gives her daughter the time to grieve properly. Naofumi, however, isn't even sad. All of his rage, everything, it's all kinda just gone. As he says, that must be the price for using that transformation. It strips me of my humanity, my emotions, everything I hold dear. 'Cause what are those useful to a kaiju? And Raftalia says, I'm sure there's a way you'll get them back, and Naofumi just says, I doubt it. As he ends up having to share a room, he later comes to find out, as he ends up meeting his roommates Lark and Therese, as Naofumi can immediately sense that they're gonna be a problem. So he doesn't interact with them too much, and once they get to the archipelago, he makes sure to give them a warning saying, if you mess with me in any way, shape, or form, you're dead. Got it? As the two of them can just sense the bloodlust and simply nod their heads. As Lark is thinking to himself, damn it, we have to fight a monster like him? Gonna need Glassy for this one. As the archipelago event happens, Naofumi is actually training Raftalia viciously. She has no free time, no time to rest, none of that. Naofumi doesn't want what happened to Philo to happen to Raftalia. Even if he isn't personally saddened by it, he knows it's only because the kaiju form ripped away his humanity. And he's hoping desperately that there is some way to get it back, even if he doesn't show that to Raftalia. So, Over the next couple of days, they end up power leveling Raphtalia all the way up to level 80, as they start realizing that all the XP they're getting isn't getting that high up. After all, getting Raphtalia to level 80 was no small feat, but Naofumi only went up 5 levels. He's at level 155 now. As Raphtalia says, yeah, I know. And so they decide just to take a break, and they're pretty confident in Naofumi's strength if nothing else. And so Naofumi decides to go for a swim, because he needs to cool off his head, and he asks Raphtalia if she wants to come, and she declines. As Naofumi swims down there a little bit, he ends up coming across something. It's an underwater temple. And so he just decides that he'll tell Raphtalia about it later as he swims towards it, easily pushing open the doors and going inside, where he finds a dragon hourglass. His eyes open wide as he sees that it's almost empty. Naofumi immediately blitzes up to the surface and tells Raphtalia that they need to have a conference and they need to have it now. And so they do. As the days go by, everyone is prepared for battle as they're out in the seas on the Queen's ships, and Lark is even there. Naofumi begins to think, maybe I was a bit too hasty. And then the wave begins. As Naofumi says, please don't be Godzilla, please don't be Godzilla. As he just sees this giant aqua monster, and he just immediately says, okay, I got this one easy. As with Mothra's wings, he's easily able to cover the entire battlefield in seconds. It's not even a contest. However, Naofumi begins taking things out as he sees the giant boss just jumping right at him. And so Naofumi grabs it and simply rips it in half, rather easily, as he throws it to the side, and the wave doesn't end. Naofumi's like, okay, which one is it? As Naofumi sees something moving in the water as it comes up, but before he can even focus on it, he's hit in the back with a fire spell from Therese. As Naofumi glares at her, as he tells Raphtalia, Motoyasu, Ren, and Itsuki to fend them off. However, the 3 heroes get absolutely folded immediately, except for Motoyasu, who's actually doing pretty alright against Therese, but has no chance against Lark. So Raphtalia teams up with Motoyasu. Through having everything ripped away from him, actually decided to power level like a motherfucker. And so he's just going beast mode. He actually unlocked his own curse series after that, called the Cursed Series of Envy, which he puts up a field not allowing anyone to teleport away. And so, with them unable to escape by any means, it is a very close quarter fight. As Naofumi says he'll be over there as soon as he can, but before he can even react, he is hit by a tail and sent flying. As Naofumi hits the remains of the boss and looks up to see an angry Godzilla staring at him. As Naofumi says, right, time to challenge the king of the monsters. As Naofumi rushes at Godzilla, who he has to avoid an atomic breath from, and barely does. He decides it's gonna be a lot safer to use his Kaiju transformation, but he can't. It says insufficient humanity left. As Naofumi says, what the hell does that mean? as he's trying to read through the skill requirements while dodging, and it says that you must have strong emotions or attachment to humanity to sacrifice in order to transform into the kaiju. And so Naofumi is kind of in a tough spot as he sees a gauge and he's almost there at the bare minimum, which would give him 5 minutes at most in that transformation, and he knows that would be enough with the amp it gives him, but he just can't get to it until he sees Raphtalia getting overwhelmed by Lark as she puts up her defense and it spit right back at her, which ends up cutting off one of Raphtalia's arms. And Naofumi is fueled by anger once more, which gets him to the minimum requirement as he transforms, and the timer ticks down at 5 minutes remaining. Naofumi and Godzilla are absolutely going at it, but Godzilla is losing ground fast. It's in the water, Godzilla's home advantage, and he is still getting outpaced, outmatched, and outmaneuvered. As Naofumi uses the Muto skill against Godzilla, which allows him the time to use something he didn't before. The dragon's power, which has given him insane fire skills that he breathes down Godzilla's throat, burning him from the inside, as Naofumi uses the skill Rhydon's Fury as it completely disintegrates Godzilla's skin and kills him, as the flames cannot be put out by the water. As Naofumi absorbs Godzilla's skills, his essence, his kaiju transformation gets a lot stronger, as it's unlocked the skill Atomic Fist, which Naofumi then races back in there, seeing Raphtalia about to die as he caves in Lark's skull, sending it all the way through his body and out from between his legs, a straight shot down. Therese, seeing this, is terrified as Naofumi rips her hands off and then goes and puts his fingers on the gem on her forehead, ripping it out and shoving it down her throat before burning her alive, as he just leaves her there to burn to death, as glass appears and Naofumi just glares at her, saying, "You won't survive this time, bitch," as he blitzes her and Glass doesn't even know what's happening before Naofumi says, "Atomic Fist," just hitting her with the power of an atomic blast in punch form, completely disintegrating Glass's body. As the wave finally ends, Naofumi is able to save Raphtalia's life, but her arm is kind of gone. And so they all head back to the kingdom, where the queen actually ends up rewarding all of the heroes, as Motoyasu apologizes to Naofumi for not being able to defend Raphtalia. And Naofumi actually applauds Motoyasu, saying he really got his shit together and was actually the second strongest hero out there. Keep it up. As Ren and Itsuki are shocked seeing Naofumi actually praise Motoyasu for something. And so Motoyasu says thanks, but I'm still leaving the kingdom. There's nothing left for me here, so I'm heading off. Maybe I'll go to Siltfeld, even though they don't like any of the other heroes besides the shield. It would be a nice change of pace to experience what you went through. Maybe then I'll be able to acquire the strength to be like you. As Motoyasu waves goodbye to Naofumi and Raphtalia, he sets off on his journey. Meanwhile, the queen gives Naofumi rulership over his own area, which used to be Raphtalia's home village. as all the people Naofumi has helped over his time in this world come to help him restore this village. Naofumi says that there are many monsters more waiting for him, monsters he doesn't know, and monsters that he will have to fight blindly. And so he says with a heavy soul, I'll find a way to kill all the kaiju in every world until I'm the only one left. And Raphtalia, then I will have you kill me.